Hey yogis, I got another 15-minute tutorial for you today, and this is for a posture called Ekapada Vashisthasana. So it is a one-legged side plank essentially. Looks really cool, really pretty. It's a phenomenal stretch. It's one of my favorite full body stretches. But I'm going to go over some ways to access this really expansive posture in some pretty easy ways. So, like always, make sure that you are thoroughly warmed up because this does require quite a bit of hamstring openness. That's a good word for it. So it requires a lot of hamstring effort, but it also does require engagement of the shoulders, the upper body, and of course, like everything with yoga, our core. So make sure you've done a quick practice, something to get you warmed up and ready to get started. All right, so for this posture, you can benefit from using a strap, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to be using one. I love the strap, I think it's great, but sometimes I think that there's a lot of understanding of the mechanics of the body when we just use our own limbs to help us explore a movement like this. But again, you can always use a strap, have it nearby if you feel more comfortable working with it. But again, for the purposes of this tutorial, we won't be necessarily using one today. All right, now to start, my favorite way to modify most standing postures or weight-bearing postures is going to be either by taking a forearm or a knee to the ground. For this type of shape, the best modification that we can access when we're first starting to get familiar with it is just by dropping a knee. So we'll come forward into a tabletop position, and we'll start by bringing the left foot forward just towards the top of the mat. And some great stretching exercises for poses like this would be lizard pose, a lot of runner's stretch, to help access and warm up the back of the body, and of course to open up through the hips. Don't forget we need postures like chaturanga to warm up the upper body, and maybe some open shoulder work like a twist and open twist, or maybe a shoulder roll on the ground. All of those postures are going to help to really bring this alive. All right, so my left foot is forward, my right knee is stacked underneath my right hip, and we'll start here. First point of contact is bringing the peace fingers to the big toe, which is traditional. Now, for some yogis, I've heard it both ways, like some find this easier than others, some find this pretty difficult to hold on to the toe. There is another grip that you can take which uses the hand, and you just reach for the blade side edge of the foot. So that's also an option. Depending on what you're comfortable with, you can work on either or. Just be mindful that if you're working with the blade side edge of the foot, your arm needs to come inside of the leg. Okay, so if my arm were on the outside edge of my leg, it's going to be really hard to access that stretch without blocking myself with my own arm. So make sure the arm is inside of the leg before you get started. All right, so I'm going to take peace fingers to my big toe. Again, that's just my preference. I'm going to work on pulling the left knee in. Notice I'm staying on my right shin bone, pushing down into my right hand, and just getting familiar with the hip space. Nice, exhale, place the foot back down. Drag your hips back just to release that stretch from the body. And then again, coming forward, peace fingers to the big toe. And this is a really gradual process. Now, as I start to pull this foot up, a lot of my weight is leaning in towards my right arm. To help balance that weight, you need to start to spin the right heel back behind you, or right shin bone, back behind you. Start to spin that back, pull up, and open. Okay, just staying here, again, getting used to the weight. Maybe you're holding the blade side edge, which gives you a little bit more power. Pushing down into that right arm. Inhale, and then exhale, we're going to lower it back down. Nice, hips back. Just give yourself a moment. You're going to take that a step further. We're going to start to add some extension. Remember, you have to use this back leg as a kickstand. So if I keep it to up and down on my mat, I'm gonna become really wobbly. So I wanna make sure I kick that back, grab for that left blade side edge or big toe, open up, keep spinning that shin bone until the foot's all the way back behind me, and then just kick forward. Again, I'm kind of leaning back, my tush is kind of heavy. That's okay, but start to become conscious that you drive the hips forward, right? Deep breath in, and then exhale, we're gonna come back down. Nice, let it go. If you need to roll out your right wrist, always a good idea. Now we take that even further. Reaching for the foot. I'm gonna inhale, spin, spin, spin. I'm gonna start to push the foot forward and then using the hip in its socket, actually spinning it open until I come into this modified Ekapadavashistasana. Nice. So this is always an option to take when you're in class and you can't quite access the full posture quite yet. If you're using a strap, you would just be holding on to your foot with a strap. Take a breath in. Let your chest expand, big heart opener, and then exhale, bring everything down. Nice runner stretch to clear it out. Deep breath in, slow breath out. All right, go ahead and bring your left knee back, give that leg a break, and just come down into a seated or kneeling posture. So that's a really beautiful way to modify such a huge pose. It's also a good way to practice clearing up your form, right? If you want to start to really find deep extension and a big expansion through the chest, that's a good way to practice and to spend some time. Now for the full posture, all you would change is that rather than being modified and on a knee, you would start to extend that leg into a full side plank variation. So it looks a little something like this. Now, for purposes of this tutorial, again, I'm just going to step my left foot forward, but you might be doing something different in a flow. My right hand is flat. Now notice, and this is something I should have probably emphasized a bit more clearly, is that my right wrist isn't necessarily under my shoulder. There's a little misconception when it comes to side plank. Your wrist and shoulder do not stack in this posture. You're actually a little bit behind the wrist point, just slightly. It's not a lot, but it's enough to allow you a strong push and rotation through the rotator cuff, chest, and then up into the top arm. Now, if you're stacked, it's not going to hurt anything. You just might be cutting the posture short just a bit. So something to keep in mind. Again, if you're doing it, it's not the end of the world, right? All will be well. Okay, so my knee's down, but I'm going to start to tuck my toes and lift the leg. Now, a lot of times where I see students get stuck is they'll come onto the blade side edge, they'll start to lift that foot up and in, and they just get stuck right on the blade side edge of the foot, and they're kind of in this shape. Well, the key or the secret is to trying to flatten that back foot down. I want to try to stabilize it as much as I can. And then surprisingly, you actually keep a slight bend in your right knee. Ready? Here we go. I'm gonna lift up. I'm gonna flatten my foot. Notice I've got a slight bend in my right knee, my bottom knee. I'm gonna bend, rotate through the chest, kick forward, and then opening up, pushing into that right leg, opening up my chest, sending my hips forward. Breath in, and then exhale, coming back down and continuing your practice. And you clear it out, let it go, give yourself a moment to catch your breath. All right, so that's Ekapadavashistasana. Really, really pretty pose. I hope you guys enjoy, and again, if you have any other suggestions, questions, or comments, just be sure to let me know.